oh, I have to get this done right, or this has got to be perfect, or if I don't get every single one of these tasks done, things are just going to go wrong. Like if it's very clear that they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves to get things done, that is a great sign as well. So again, they might not come out and say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm burned out, but you might hear things like, I've been putting a lot of pressure on myself lately, or I really need to get all of these things done before next week. And that's a good time to be kind of digging in. Why do you really, like really be kind of thinking about some of that. Mistakes, right? The more mistakes we see people making, it probably has to do with that brain thing, right? We're just a little bit off. If we feel like there's a lot of mistakes, that's a good sign of burnout or overwhelm. And are we constantly plugging holes in the dam? Like I have that visual of Ice Age where the rodent, I think his name's Scat or something like that. The rodent is like crawling up the giant ice dam, and there's a hole, and then there's another hole, and then there's another, and he's like constantly trying to like plug these holes. So are we plugging the holes in the dam or putting out fires? That's like a common term that we all hear. If we are constantly in that mode of putting out fires, constantly in that mode of plugging holes in the dam, if we aren't already in burnout, it's a great sign we're going to be there soon, because all we're doing is just constantly trying to chase something instead of getting ahead and being strategic. If there's lots of PTO, illness, sick days, excessive vacation, grumpiness, irritability, and a little bit of just why bother attitude. It doesn't matter if I do this or not. No one's going to care. No one's going to have an opinion. Those are good things to be looking for as well. Jill, was that you? I'm sorry. Was there a question, Jill?
Oh, someone just came off mute, but I got it.
Oh, okay, perfect. Just making sure. Okay, good. So signs, right? So team, individual, maybe even yourself, just kind of be thinking about those signs, because, and I'm going to get into this later, but it's just really critical to note as a manager, I can't go to Jill if she's my employee and say, Jill, are you overwhelmed? Are you burned out? And I'll get in the details of kind of the why, but there's a good chance she's not going to receive that well, or she's not going to be honest, or maybe she doesn't want to tell me because she's embarrassed. It's just not going to get to the root of something that's going to help me help her. But if I can be looking for these signs that she's exhibiting, I can ask some other more powerful questions surrounding that to help her move out of that space. Okay, so what's the cause? I do think this is quickly important, so I want to touch on it just briefly at least, but what is the cause? Could it be that individual and that self, that pressure they're putting on themselves? Could it be the team, whether it's like competition or just all the goals and things we have as a team? Could it be the leader, you independently, something that you're doing to cause some of that? Or maybe it's the culture of the company overall. So I'm a firm believer that it could be a little bit or any and or all of these. Feel free to type something in the chat. Like when you see at your company and with your team, or even yourself, a lot of burnout and overwhelm, what's causing it? Is there one particular thing that you're noticing is causing it? People doing it to themselves, the leaders that put the pressure, the team, the culture, like what are those things that you think are causing it? Studies will tell us that it's really primarily this like piece of company culture, which, as you can imagine, bleeds into all of these. So, okay, that logically could make sense. But I like to have this conversation so that we're having that self-awareness of, regardless of what's causing it, how can I impact it? Because it's really easy for us to just kind of make the excuse of, well, it's caused by company culture. It's caused by this. Okay, fine. But what can I do independently as that leader? How can I help these people move out of it? So being really focused on what we can do as leaders. All right, so really simply, when we talk about how to move out of burnout, I'm going to touch on like 3 basic steps essentially, and I kept them extremely simple, and these will be in your notes to Jill. Take down some notes as we have the conversation because the slides are pretty bare. But in step 1 here, we're just talking about understanding the why. Why is it happening in the first place? This is extremely important because when we talk about, here I've got this burned out team, I need them to still get stuff done. Like we have got to execute. We have got to move forward. We've got to move past the brain fog. Well, often you can't even get to that place until you can really understand the why and what is going on. So I thought it might be helpful to share a little bit of like a case study so you can kind of get some perspective on the why, and you'll see some different components and things that you could potentially do to help with the why. So this one's a little bit wordy. You don't need to listen and read the whole thing, but just listen in. So one of my clients, she's a VP, she's got 6 directors. So she came to me for coaching initially because of this kind of team overwhelm burnout thing. Now, she didn't identify it that way, right? She didn't say, my team is overwhelmed, my team is burned out. It was more, I've got this team that's clear that they're unhappy. I can see that their unhappiness is really causing some low morale and it's flowing downhill. Because think about that director level, then depending on your hierarchy, there might be senior managers and then maybe team leads. So it's all of a sudden, it's not just 6 people, those directors that are having the problem, it's everyone below because it absolutely flows downhill. So kind of just wanting to make sure she quickly drew attention to what was going on and try to fix it. Work was behind, they're constantly putting out fires, everyone's in the weeds, there's no strategy or anything going on. So for her, that first step was really taking this time to understand the why. Why are they feeling this way? Why is morale low? Why is everyone behind? And why are they kind of not able to operate at that strategic level? Like really thinking about that and going through that why component. So what I was able to support her with from a coaching perspective was diving in and doing things like a leadership 360. Get clear, ask those people around you. This is something we do for our clients, but you can collect that feedback in any way. What does your manager say? What do your peers say? What do your employees say about how you are supporting them, your strengths and your opportunities for improvement? What signs does this give you as to why everyone else could possibly be feeling that way? Company surveys, a lot of companies do these surveys. Do you actually read the results thoroughly and try to take some action and execute on them? How can you use that information? Here we ask people, how are you doing? Are you happy? What are we doing with that data? How are we utilizing that data? So use those tools and those resources that you already have out there. Making sure that one-on-one meetings are filled with really good, effective questions. Again, I mentioned I'll go into this a little bit deeper, but what are those questions that surround the problem that you're trying to get to? Are you asking those coaching questions and showing up as a coach? Those deep questions, those open-ended questions, not just those closed off questions, yes, no questions, not those leading ones that only get the answers that you want, but those ones that are actually going to give you information you can do something with. And are you making sure that those are happening regularly in your one-on-one meetings? She did some exercises too, just on initial prioritization, time management. So really kind of, again, getting back to the why, what do their calendars look like? Are they going to meetings they don't need to be going to? Are we creating reports that no one actually reviews? Because we know that happens all the time. Not only that, do I have any directors who are kind of like yes men, the term yes men, right? Like they have a really hard time saying no to projects and they'll just tell everyone, sure, our team can do that for you. Yes, we can do that for you. No problem. And those people are just kind of continuing to bring more and more and more and more work into the fold because they have that inability to say no. And they allow that scope creep, if you will. So doing an analysis around all of that to really understand what was going on with the team. And then really making sure too that the team is being given that space to come up with solutions on their own, to have that sense of ownership on their own. So one thing we see a lot with burnout and overwhelm that often happens is it might be that there's micromanagement, but it's also often just that we're just told what to do and we're just repeat. We're not in that creative space where we're coming up with solutions on our own. So if I have a problem, Jill's my manager, I come to Jill, I've got this problem, what should I do? If she's constantly just telling me what to do versus asking me questions like, well, Jen, what do you think a good solution for that might be? Then I'm never going to get in that mode where I have that sense of ownership, I have that empowerment, and frankly, that creativity and excitement and high morale to come to work because I don't feel that connection to the job. I'm just hitting the buttons, right? I'm just punching the clock. I'm just doing what boss Jill says. So what are we doing to make sure that we're helping them to come up with solutions on their own and creating that sense of ownership, connecting that why? These are things we could spend every single one of these an entire hour or more talking about. These are things that get covered in leadership coaching to make sure that we're really setting our clients up for success. Beyond that, she was able to then take all that why information, right, and figure out what would work for her, build a plan, start to go and implement on some of this stuff, and make sure that she's focusing on those right skills. Because again, it might come across as one thing like putting out fires or being behind on work, but maybe it's really showing up in delegation and not delegating properly, or the right tasks, or how to delegate better, prioritization of work, or maybe it's even our communication. I'm not being really clear and letting people know as a leader what it is I really expect of them, or what it is that I really need, or when it's actually due. or what is actually important and what is not, all of these types of things. So she was able to really kind of hone in with all that in that why to create a plan that was relevant for her. So then we could shift the focus of the coaching around communication, prioritization, delegation. There was also feedback in there, some other things I haven't highlighted here, but instead of just that simple, my leaders are unhappy, what do I do? So we're not, because we want to make sure we're solving the right problem, right? So she needs to dig into the why to really understand, to make sure we're solving the right problem so that she can move forward and get that team into that mode where they can be effective. Okay, I'm going to pause just really quick there. Jill, anything super important that needs to be pointed out before I move us into step 2 here?
Nope, you are great to go.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jill. Okay, so step 2, how to move out of burnout. Step 2, be realistic. I know I told you these steps are really boring and simple. It's true. So the bullets are things here like prioritize, right? That's something I touched on in that case study. Delegating properly. If you haven't been to my delegation webinar, Jill's going to send out an email after this that has a link to our YouTube channel that has all of our past webinars and trainings. In the leadership section, there's one on delegation that's really great. I highly encourage you to watch that one if you haven't before, because delegation is really all about making sure you're giving the right tasks to the right people the right way, not just saying, oh, Jill has capacity, I'm going to just throw it at Jill. She can be the one to do it. How do we make sure we're giving it to the person who maybe has the most interest in actually doing that task? And they may be the most overwhelmed and overburdened at the moment, but what can I take off of their plate, right? So this is where we get to, as leaders, get a little bit creative. Don't be afraid to move work around. Don't be afraid to shift things. Don't be afraid to prioritize. Don't be afraid to let something fail or fall or a ball drop, if you will, that's maybe just not as important. It doesn't mean it's not important. It wouldn't be on our plates if it wasn't. It's very easy for all of us to show up and just say, well, everything's important. How can I prioritize when everything's important? There's got to be something that the ball can drop a little bit and, the earth is not going to end, kind of a thing. Now, that might not be the case for every profession, I will say, but for the most part, that's going to be the case. There's something where we can kind of let the ball drop just a little bit. So how can we make sure we're moving work around, we're prioritizing appropriately, and really focusing on the right stuff? I think this is one of those modes where, as a leader, you almost have to stop, take a step back, look at the big picture, look at what's going on with your team, and allow yourself even to get creative. There is not always like a real fast, quick fix to this stuff. So look at what you've got in front of you. How can you move the parts and the pieces around to make it work? And you just communicate to your team what's going on, right? Set those goals, communicate clearly. Hey, I'm going to change your work for the next 3 weeks while we get out of this fire mode, but it doesn't mean your job's changing permanently. It's just a short-term fix or whatever. As long as they really understand what's going on and why you're doing it, they will be right alongside with you and probably agreeing because, hey, this is going to get me out of that fire mode. That's fabulous. Like, I am sick of being in that fire mode. So get creative. I think we forget sometimes as leaders to pull on that creative component that we need to really pull on. Make sure that when we do have tasks to do and things that we need to do, it's really clear what those goals are. It's really clear what needs to be done. We're not just making assumptions that people are hearing what we're saying. We're a little bit over communicating. It doesn't mean micromanage. I just want to be clear with that. Over communicate does not mean micromanage. It just means you're communicating in a number of different ways, because let's face it, some of us hear better in a situation like we're in right now. Some of us hear better when we read an article. Some of us hear better when we see it in an email. So we always use the term like communicate 7 times, 7 ways. In other words, communicate as many different ways and as many different times as possible so that at least one of those components, it sinks in. I'm going to sit here and tell you this right now, but maybe until you go rewatch the video, read one of the blog posts, read the note summary, watch it again, like maybe only then will it really start to sink in. So don't be afraid to over communicate. It does not mean you are micromanaging. Just be intentional, be specific, set clear goals. Follow-up is a really key one that really gets missed, especially when we talk about things like accountability, which can be really important when we're in this sort of burnout and overwhelmed phase. Is that follow-up, is that accountability piece. It's really easy for us to just kind of either forget to do it or just choose not to. Like, we're too busy. Oh, that was due a week ago. I got to keep running. I can't focus on it right now, kind of thing. So make sure that there is the appropriate follow-up and then start to determine, how do your people like to be followed up with? What works best for each of them independently and individually? And it doesn't mean you're chasing them constantly for information, but you're following up in the appropriate way, or you're asking them to follow up with you. Like the follow up can be, please contact me in 1 week and let me know how things are going. Like whatever makes sense. Or somehow, if you're giving them enough of that ownership, accountability, and autonomy, they will just come to you with those report outs. Or your one-on-ones are set up with a really great agenda where they're coming to you with those report outs. You are not having to pull the follow-up, they are pushing the follow-up. So being focused on different ways to improve that process for yourself as well. Celebrate, provide positive feedback, celebrate. Yes, I have that intentionally on there twice because it's really important. When we are in this mode of burnout and overwhelm, if you want your team to start to get shit done, you have got to reward them for the shit they are getting done. I mean, at the end of the day, that is imperative. You better make sure that you are celebrating what they're doing really well as they're doing it so that they are motivated and encouraged to do more. It's the snowball that rolls downhill. Confidence, motivation, all of those. There is not really a super secret sauce. There's tips, there's tricks, sure. But I tell you what, you build that snowball, you pack it tight, you set it down, you start rolling that thing downhill, and it picks up speed and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Same thing here. So please celebrate their successes as they have them and provide the right level of positive feedback that's very specific and intentional so that they get it. They are like, wow, Jen appreciates me. Like, this is amazing. I'm going to keep showing up for Jen. So if you like secret sauce, big tip right there, highlight, circle, stamp, written twice, probably should have made a big blow up, although we are going to have another slide for celebrate. Please do celebrate the team. This is step 3. This is how we get stuff done. And we make sure that we move out of that burnout by making sure that people really understand the value that they bring. So I'm going to talk about this more, but quick in the chat, I want you to be completely genuinely honest right now. Do you do a good job of celebrating your team's successes? Do you do a good job of celebrating individual successes? Can you do better? Maybe rate yourself 1 to 5, something along those lines, whatever feels good. Could you do a better job? Are you doing a good job? Those of you who think you're doing a good job, put some stuff in the chat, let others know what you're doing, and we'll see if we touch on some of that here. Those of you who think you could be doing a better job, reflect on why. What is it about it that is hard to do? And it might not be that I'm not a positive person or I'm not a happy person. It might be, I don't have any stinking time. I'm too burned out. I'm too overwhelmed. Like, it doesn't matter the reason. You can reflect on that for yourself, but make this something where it's like, yeah, I'm recognizing I could do a little bit better with the celebration and or the positive feedback. It's so easy that when we think about feedback, we think about that opportunity for improvement, fixing. The positive is important too. And there's a whole nother leadership training on feedback as well that you can go in and watch as well. But okay, celebrate. So I'm going to harp on this a little. Thanks for those of you who put some notes in the chat. Celebrate genuinely. I love this photo. This is the dear Jill who's on the phone. Not to call her out, but it's just such a cute photo. I just love it. So be sure that you are celebrating genuinely. You are being authentic. You are not just saying hey, I appreciate that. Like, you have some energy, enthusiasm, and passion around it. If you can't be genuine and passionate, don't do it. Don't do it. It'll take you down the wrong path. It's better to not do it at all than to do it disingenuinely. So make sure it's authentic. Make sure it is genuine when you are thanking someone, when you are celebrating, when you are providing positive feedback. Okay. So step 3, celebrate positive feedback. So I've got a few different things I want to talk about within here. First one, let's talk about positive feedback for a minute. This is probably one of my favorite things to talk about as far as fun stuff goes. Feedback is really important that it's done probably, I like to say equally positive an opportunity, just because I want people to feel like, okay, I get that, equal 1 for 1. But in reality, you almost need to be providing more positive feedback than opportunity for improvement feedback. There's a lot of good reasons for that, right? It's everything I just said. It's the snowball that rolls downhill. You build trust. You're filling that trust bank so that when you need to make a withdraw, big overwhelming project that might burn team out, etc., it's a lot easier to do so. It's a lot easier to pull on them when you need to, because you have done such a good job of filling that bank. So think about, have this visual in your head. Okay, I have my bank. How much am I filling it? And am I filling it the right amount for every employee? Am I filling it somewhat equally? Or am I recognizing, wow, I give Sally a lot of feedback that's positive. I don't ever give any to Bob. I am doing Bob a disservice. So what does everyone's individual piggy bank look like? And how well are you doing at filling that, and really kind of building that up so that you can make that withdrawal when you need it? Your positive feedback needs to be specific. It needs to be of value. I'm going to give the same example I always give. So I apologize if you've heard it before, but hey, 7 times 7 ways. So we're just going to repeat it anyways. We leave the meeting. I am your manager. I say, hey, great job and that presentation today. You might feel good, like, oh, thanks, like pat on the back. That was nice. Jen said good job. Like that might feel good for a minute. But does that have a long lasting impact? Probably not. Does that give you anything that you can utilize to improve or do better next time? Probably not. Is it better to do that than nothing? Yes, it is. So if that's all you can get at the moment, then do it. Do what you can do. But we want to get out of that mode of basically just congratulating people for showing up to work, right? And this is why a lot of people struggle, a lot of managers struggle with positive feedback, is they're like, I can't just tell people every day, like, basically, thanks for coming to work. Like, that's what they get paid for. They should want to come to work, right? And that's true, right? We shouldn't have to just say, hey, thanks for coming to work. But the feedback needs to be specific enough that someone can have a lesson or learning from that. So we get out of that meeting. Instead, it's great job on that presentation today. Slide 8 had some really critical bullets that stood out to everyone in the room. I noticed everyone really leaning in when you were sharing slide 8. And I noticed your body language was really excited and intentional. Whatever you did to come up with those bullets on slide 8, you might want to think about creating that as a template and repeating it, because man, it was great. Like it was good. Good job. Kind of a weird example because it's the one I use all the time, but specific, right? It's really clear. It's really specific. That person can walk away and go, okay, all right, my presentation skills were good. People leaned in. They were listening attentively. They really liked slide 8. I should go and mimic that for a future presentation. That's something that can be done. That's something the employee can actually go and do something with. So make your your feedback specific, and as clear as possible. Real time as well, right? So I'm highlighting this kind of real time discussion thing, especially in this sort of like virtual environment that we're in right now. We really need to make sure that we are carving out as much time as possible to actually speak to people. I cannot tell you how many leaders I work with that will reluctantly, but they will admit to me, and maybe this is a great question for those of you tuning in right now, they will reluctantly admit that, yeah, we have not had as many face to face, and by face to face, of course, I mean Zoom, right? Face to face Zoom meetings, as we can, because it's really easy to just sort of get busy and let those slide, because we're not just popping by each other and saying, oh, hey, do you have a second to pop into the office, or meeting up at the water cooler and chatting for 5 minutes. So we have a tendency to either drop the ball and not do our one-on-ones, not schedule them at all, schedule over them, Slack or chat over email status, and that's it, because it's the only thing we can afford time to do. Am I saying those things are bad? No, but would it be better to have a lot more FaceTime and real-time discussion? Yes. Figure out what works for your team. Is it daily stand-ups? Like, what are the ways that you can get creative, right? Here we go, creative brain again. Use that creative brain you have and come up with something that will work for you and your team, so that you are having as many opportunities to have those real-time discussions as possible. If we get out of that meeting and you did a great job, slide 8 was the one that had all the wonderful bullets, but we don't meet for a one-on-one for 2 weeks, and I wait all the way until 2 weeks to tell you, oh, by the way, great job in that meeting, I still gave you all that same feedback. I mean, it'll resonate, but it won't have as powerful and impactful meaning, for sure. It won't feel the same. And there's a good chance, if you're anything like me, 40 plus, you're all of a sudden, it's like, oh man, I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone what meeting they're talking about right now. And what the heck was on slide 8? Like, I don't have a clue, right? So as much as you can, real time, right in the moment as possible. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to segue a little bit kind of into this celebrate mode of asking your team how they like to be rewarded, how they like to be celebrated, how they like to be recognized, how they like to be motivated, how they like to receive feedback, what type of feedback they like, these types of questions. You get my point. So get creative, find the questions that are right for you. If you don't know these answers, ask them now. There's no harm, no foul. It's not like, oh, we've been working together for 3 years and I never asked you this. Like, I guess I can't ask now because it'd be embarrassing. No, level set, start right now. There's intention, there's reason. Don't be afraid to ask right now. So find out how your people like to be rewarded, find out how they like to be recognized, find out how they like to be celebrated, whether you ask that independently, as a team, whatever the case might be. One of the reasons why it's really important to take the time to do that is because if Jill tells me, I am really nervous and embarrassed in group situations, please don't ever tell me I did a good job at one of our group staff meetings. Then I need to honor that. I need to not put her up on a pedestal when she does a good job if that is going to make her feel icky and bad. And believe it or not, those people exist, whether you might even be one of them, but those people do exist. When I was a manager, I had one person who was definitely one of these sort of like, I would call her a silent leader. She was always in the back, but yet everyone really looked to her. She was just so great. She was like the perfect example of how you don't have to be this big, boastful person to be a great leader. But she told me, I never want recognition in a meeting. I never want praise or reward in a meeting. Do not send me my 5-year anniversary gift, in the big all hands meeting where they always, put someone's name up on the screen type of thing. She's like, please don't do those things. It's humiliating to me and it makes me feel very uncomfortable. And it was actually a little bit of work for me on my end to remember, like, okay, Susan doesn't want that stuff. That's okay. That's okay. But I had to remember that. I had to be really intentional. I'm glad that I asked so that I never put her into a position where she was uncomfortable. Perfect segue then into this group praise that I'm about to talk about was assuming that everyone's situation and you don't have any of those individuals on your team. You don't have to be the one that does all the celebrating. The weight does not have to be on your shoulders. As managers, we have to think the weight to do everything is on our shoulders. We have to have the direction. We have to have the answers. We have to know it all. No, you don't. You do not have to be the one to celebrate and let no one else do it. Like, no, use the team. So even at Ama La Vida, we have our once a month, we have our everybody meeting where we all get together. And there's always a slide. I was trying to remember what was on the slide. I don't think it says celebrate. I think it says like wins or something. I can't even remember what it says, but that's our time where we just get to kind of shout outs. Thank you. Thank you. See, there's one of my team members coming to the rescue. I appreciate that. Wins and shout outs. So, and I love that word, right? Shout outs. That's such a great word. So that's the time where I get to say, Jill, thank you so much for running those slides for me during the Get Shit Done webinar, and collaborating and getting all those questions, sending the follow-up email. I'm being very specific with her, all those things. I am grateful for you. So I'm doing that as a peer, right? I'm doing that as a peer. It's not on, her boss to go around and collect information from everyone and say, okay, what are the things you want me to say about Jill? No, the idea is we all get to do it together. We get to collaborate together. So let the peers be a part of it. Let the team be a part of it. Don't put the full ownership and the weight on you as a manager to have to feel like you have to lead that discussion. So just a kind of a creative idea there. And if any of you have any other really good celebrating successes or, team group praise strategies, like any other things like that, put them in the chat so that others who are here listening in can take advantage and learn from that as well. Okay, the last couple are, these ones that sort of vary, I guess I'll say, by company. So monetary rewards, PTO, like, do you have the chance to give extra days off when people are doing really great? Especially when we're like borderline or in that burnout overwhelm mode, man, that would feel good, right? So what are those creative things you can do? Monetary rewards. This can even just be things like the first person to complete this gets a $25 gift card to Amazon. Like, I don't know, whatever. Get creative. As a matter of fact, if you think you need ideas on this one, like if you have a budget, but you're like, I don't know what to do with the budget, but I'd like to use it for this, just go to Google. Monetary rewards to celebrate team success. You'll probably get 10 articles right there. Boom, right in front of you. So use those funds if you have them. If you have a budget, this is a great time to be taking advantage of them and to use them for your team. The last one I want to share is my own kind of personal experience. It's the rubber ducky. When I worked at Boeing, my HR team was, I think, about 40 people that was on our HR team in the IT organization. When we had our monthly all hands meeting where we all got together, we had this reward of the rubber ducky. And the person who received it the last month was the one who got to give it out. So what was really cool about that was it wasn't the leadership team that was deciding who gets the rubber ducky. It was the peers. So if I was the one who had the rubber ducky last month, it would be my decision and my choice to award it to Jill for all the great things that she has done, right? So it was my choice to be the one to kind of reward who on the team got it. And I could reward it to a manager even if I wanted to. I could give it to anybody that it made sense to give it to. And then it was really made to be this fun, special thing. It had a unique slide in the meeting, and you got an actual rubber ducky. We would just inter-office mail this rubber ducky around to everyone. And there was a small budget. It was, whatever, $10. Rubber duckies are not very expensive, $5 probably, to purchase the rubber ducky. So as the recipient of the previous month, I got to go pick out the rubber ducky that I wanted to give to the next person. And then I would just inter-office mail it to them, and they'd get it. And the couple days after they got their award, their ducky would show up and they could put it on their desk. And I know for me, it was it was a fun thing, right? It was a reward from other people on the team. It was someone else on the team celebrating me. When I was given my rubber ducky, it just so happened to be when I was pregnant with my daughter, and the gal who gave it to me gave me a regular rubber ducky and a baby rubber ducky. And it was just very special. It sat on my desk in those moments where I was feeling stressed or frustrated or confused. I would just look at the rubber ducky and I would giggle and I would laugh. And then I would think of her too, because she was the one who gifted it to me. So these kind of little fun things can be really helpful to help the team kind of go, yeah, things are tough right now, but we still got to get shit done. Like, how do we move forward? So really be thinking about those creative ways to celebrate success, provide that positive feedback. What's your version of the rubber ducky? Maybe it's even the rubber ducky, like if that one really resonates with you. So those are just kind of my little fun celebration things. And if you have any other ideas, like I said, please do type them into the chat so that we can all share with each other. Okay, so quick reminder of the steps. Understand why, be realistic, celebrate. Really simple, nothing wild and crazy there. As you can tell, it's around the discussion that we've had today. It's around you individually understanding why your team is feeling this way. Is it the culture of the company? Is it something I'm doing independently? What are those unique skills that I need to be working on? What are those things I can do to help the team move out? Your plan is going to be different from Bob's plan, is going to be different from Sally's plan. Okay, so I mentioned in the beginning this thing about questions, and I wanted to spend just a couple minutes at the end talking about this. This is going to be kind of one of our last sort of a little bit tactical, tangible things for you to really take away. One of the things that we work on with all of our leadership clients is this idea of showing up as a coach. When they go through our Elevate program, they do a module on deep questions and really understanding what a deep question is. But the idea is we need to really be thinking intentionally about what are the right questions that we can be asking to get the information we need from our people. I like to share this example in this burnout and overwhelm section because, like I said in the beginning, put yourself in someone else's shoes. If your boss came to you and said, "Are you overwhelmed? How can I help you?" There is a good chance, depending on how you're feeling that day, like that is just gonna be agitating. It's gonna make you angry. You're not gonna hate that they asked you that question. You're gonna hate that you have to answer that question. Not only that, but can I help you? What, do they think I'm helpless and I can't do anything? So there's just so much opportunity that question could go more wrong than it could go more right. So I always use this example with my clients of like, imagine you have kind of the problem right here. I don't know if you can see me visually, you'll see, but I'm trying to mimic what's on the screen. And if overwhelm and burnout is the problem, what are the questions that surround it, right? So you can even think of, like I mentioned earlier, that core of the onion. What are the layers? And then they peel around and they peel around and they peel around and they peel around. What are those questions that surround that? So you might not say, are you burned out? But you could ask some questions that surround that, like, do you have enough time to complete all of the projects on your plate? Well, that's a good starting point. Are there any people that I need to connect you with that you currently aren't connected with? That could work. So, and it's going to be very specific to that individual, the projects, what you have going on in your company, all of that. But what are those questions that surround it? So when you're struggling to kind of figure that out, this is the type of thing that we can work with in a coaching relationship? Really, what's your situation? What's that thing we're focused on here? And then what are those right questions surrounding it that we can really be intentional about with your team, that's going to resonate with your team, that's going to be applicable for your team, that you can go back to. And then a lot of this just takes practice, 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 practice. But just something to kind of keep in mind. So if you are seeing the value that questions might bring, but not sure on how to get there, or you're not sure if they're open-ended enough, if they're deep enough, if they're too leading, these are the types of things that we can support you on in a coaching relationship. And I just want you to kind of keep that in mind, because that question piece is so key. Reflect and think about a great leader you know. When they're in a meeting, are they just telling everyone what to do, or are they asking questions? And what are those questions they're asking? And you may not, right now, just me saying that, someone may or may not come to mind, but I would encourage you in the next few meetings you're in, even just observe the behaviors of everyone else. Is there someone who's saying, well, that's interesting, what do you think about that? Or tell me more about this. Or have we thought about this solution versus that solution? What are those questions people are asking, and which ones are the ones that are enticing and engaging? And what are you stepping back going, wow, like Jill really is a great leader. I never recognized those questions that she's asking. They are so powerful. Or maybe conversely, it's, I know Bob is awesome. I know he's a great leader. He's someone I want to emulate and be like, but I can't really put my finger on why. Be willing to bet Bob asks really great questions. So just kind of be thinking about that and be looking for that. That's kind of a good reflection homework exercise for you, is those power of the questions, and are you witnessing people using them around you? Okay. Because we've talked about so much, and I've mentioned like there's the core and there's the peel of the onion, there's so much opportunity around this subject. I wanted to just give you a little bit of clarity what coaching through this particular type of thing would look like. So if you came in like, oh, burnout and overwhelm are my thing, like what would the discussion be around? The coaching would be around things like relationship building. Maybe even, are you having effective one-on-ones and staff meetings? What is your communication? Is it clear? Is it consistent? Are you flowing down the right information? How about trust? Do you trust your team? Does your team trust you? Do you trust your manager? Does your manager trust you? And then how do you build trust? That's a huge one, right? And even within that, maybe a little bit of emotional intelligence of, how much self-awareness do I even have to what's going on around me? And if people do trust me, do I even know if my team trusts me? Am I creating this psychologically safe workspace where when we are burned out, people are comfortable coming in and going, Jen, like, we are cooked, we are toasted, we are overwhelmed, help us get through this? Like, have I created that environment where someone is willing and able to raise their hand and admit that, or ask for support without fear of retaliation, without fear of me snapping at them or saying something inappropriate or rude? Is it received well? And how am I as the manager receiving it and reacting? Obviously, deep questions, we just talked about that. The power of the question related to like every possible leadership thing you could go into is unfathomable. So showing up as a coach and using that power of that deep question in every situation is so important. So really understanding what a good deep question is, practicing that, using the tools and resources that we provide to kind of continue that, and then form and create some habits around that long term, so that you can use that forever and ever and ever, and hopefully have it be one of those great skills that you got that one time you did leadership coaching that you never forget for the rest of your life, and you use forever and ever and ever. Showing up as a coach. Are you being inquisitive? Are you being genuinely curious? Do you care? Right? That type of thing. And then what are those questions that go with it? Level setting. What's the point? Why do we care? Great training out there on level setting if you want to go into the YouTube channel and find that one as well. Same thing with delegation. Great training on the YouTube channel around delegation if you want to go find that one as well. Very creative tactics around delegation can be discussed in coaching that are extremely relevant to you in your situation, that are not the things you're going to find in an article, that are just not the things you're going to find easily accessible out there. It's going to be stuff that's very tailored and unique to you and your situation. So I just thought this was important, so you really understand, because we're not only here showing up as coaches sharing this information, but we really want to make sure it resonates for you and you understand what a leadership coach is, how I would use leadership coaching to solve some of this stuff, like executing, like burnout, these types of things. Okay, so as far as today goes, next steps for you, I really want you to reflect on the discussion today and think about how it impacts you. go ahead and start typing some things in the chat. Like, what was one of the biggest takeaways for you? What are the things that you want to make sure that you do later? Okay. How are you going to assess what needs you have and then what support you need, whether that is through someone like myself, so we have like reach out and we can discuss a plan and how coaching can support you, but are there other things as well? Like, do you need something from your manager? What level of support do you need from those around you at your company or organization? We had that slide in the beginning where we circled culture, right, as being one of those kind of key reasons that this happens. Okay, well, what does that mean? Do we need to have a conversation around shifting the culture and changing the culture? And that's a beast in itself. But what does that mean? Like, what is it that you really need in order to be able to kind of make some of this stuff happen and be able to get your team to execute? Of course, I want you to craft some sort of plan they're able to start executing on. And I would love to be there to support you as a coach, or any of our wonderful leadership coaches, of course, would love to be there to support you. And we'll talk about that. And then how are you creating those long lasting habits? So I mentioned the example of like learning how to ask a really good deep question and making sure you're turning it into a habit so that you can do it forever and ever and ever and not repeat any of those bad behaviors in the future that we don't want to repeat. Okay, so I don't think we dropped this in the chat yet, so that's probably just on me because I hadn't talked about it very much. But please, if you are interested in a leadership coaching strategy session, Jill, if you could copy and paste that link back in for me, it'll be on the last slide as well, but Jill will paste it in there for you again, just so you've got it right here. Don't hesitate to go and grab one of those. So this is going to be a 30-minute meeting. It will either be with the wonderful Lori or the wonderful Sherry. And in that meeting, they will discuss with you some of your leadership goals. Very specifically, it can be around this burnout and execution piece. They are, if not here right now, they are fully aware of this training and all of the content in it, or it can be about something else. So if you have specific things that you want to focus on, you bring that to the meeting. There'll be a little bit of discussion around your strengths and your blind spots, areas for improvement. They'll talk about, at least just at a super high level, what that plan for you would look like around your leadership growth and how coaching will support you on that plan. And then really importantly, you will also then be matched with the right leadership coach based off your needs. We have this luxury of having a suite of coaches to choose from in the leadership team. So depending on exactly what you need or what your goals are or what organization you're in or where you want to be in the future, we will match you with the appropriate coach based off of that. And Lori and Sherry are the experts to do that within the team. Okay, so like I said, we're all here to help. We would love for you to grab your session with Lori or Sherry. I just wanted to make sure you knew that we really have worked, this is just a very small nugget, but we've worked with top leaders from all of these different organizations in this kind of one-on-one space, many of whom got sponsorship from their companies to pay for their coaching. So again, don't be afraid to ask that question and propose that. And as long as you make a great case, most likely there are some funds to cover that for you. When we do leadership coaching, all of the coaches will follow a very similar framework, meaning we'll do that kind of upfront assessment. We'll determine kind of where you're at. That might look like that 360 review we talked about. It might just be a deep dive of skills, or if you've done a Clifton Strength Finder, you bring it in and we talk about it. So there's lots of different assessments we'll do up front to really figure out where you're at and what your goals are. Of course, we'll craft a plan that really is perfect for you and focuses on those skills that you want to develop. And then we will use that one-on-one coaching in conjunction with those Elevate e-coaching modules to really not only take you to that next level, but like I keep harping on, right, forming those healthy habits and kind of keeping those healthy habits along going forward. Totally tailored to the individual. You might want to talk about burnout. You might want to talk about delegation. You might not know exactly what you want to talk about, but you know where you want to be. So we will cover a variety of topics. Here's just a couple to kind of give you an idea. Some of the things we've talked about today. I just mentioned deep questioning, effective feedback as being a couple of the favorite ones, but really we'll take it down any path where you need to go for your goals and your development and your growth. All right, so we are at the end. If you don't have the link yet to book your session, go ahead and do so here. It's case sensitive, so lowercase bit.ly ALVLCSS. Say that 30 times fast. So please don't hesitate to grab one of those, and you can do that even just while you're sitting here kind of as we wrap up. If you have questions, please type them in the chat. I'm actually going to, let's see, I'll leave this, I was going to stop my sharing, but I'll leave it up for now. So please type any questions in the chat that you have not had answered yet. And we will go in and we'll do a little bit of Q&A. If you have any just brief questions that you don't feel comfortable putting in the chat, don't hesitate when Jill sends out the note to just hit reply to me, because you'll have my email address on that note from Jill, and you can ask questions there as well. So, okay, deep breath. I'm going to stop talking. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great, engaging conversation today. Jill, I know we had a lot of little pop-ins of feedback and information. Do we have any questions in the chat that we can answer?
We do not have a lot of questions, just a lot of nods and yeses and
Good,
feedback.
good.
But with that being said, if anyone has any questions right now that are coming up, again, I know like what Jen said, lots of information being shared. So if questions do come up after, you could definitely reply back to that email to ask. So I'm just going to take one last look.
Wonderful.
Oh, wait, here. Great. What recognition plans do you recommend?
Recognition plans. Well, I would say that assuming that I understand the question, I think that really does depend on you and your organization. I think step one is always going to be, like I mentioned, ask your team, how do they like to be recognized? How do they like to receive recognition? What types of recognition mean something to them? It's kind of no different from, I give like the more broad example of, are you someone who's motivated by money? Are you someone who's motivated by a title? Are you someone who's motivated by the type of work you do? So just kind of making sure you understand their motivation and what recognition would be valuable to them. I'll tell you, I won't name drop, but one of my clients gave me the perfect example the other day. She said her company sent her another like jacket, fleece jacket or something. And she's like, I have 6 of these things now. And I would much rather trade those 6 in and use them for more coaching with you. So kind of just like a perfect example, like, are we just sending out more stuff, or are we checking in to see what they want? So do that check-in, find out what people need. And then if you know your budget already, great. If you don't, that would kind of be part 2, right? Go and find out what your budget is, what they will allow you to do. And then don't hesitate to, again, I go back to like, you don't have to have all the answers. Don't hesitate to kind of put something together, what you would like to propose, but then ask the team like, hey, we have some opportunity for rewards and recognition. And here are some things that I'm thinking. What would you like to see? What would you like to do? What would mean something to you? What would look like fun? Or even like creating a little team and letting them just run with it on their own. It's not something you have to do independently. So don't be afraid to pull on the team for those resources and that information, but at a minimum, at least make sure you're sort of asking all of them as well. So great question though. Okay. Any other ones, Jill?
That is it for now.
Okay, good. Good. Are we at time? A couple more minutes? Oh, 1 more minute.
We have
all right.
1 minute.
Believe it or not, we have 1 minute. That's fabulous. So Jill is going to send out a recap that has, it'll have the link to the video. It's got just a couple other resources, including that YouTube channel that we now have where all of these old trainings end up migrating over to. There is I'm trying to think what it's called. I think it's called a playlist, either channel or playlist. It'll be easy to figure out when you're on there. Where you can go in and kind of see all the leadership ones back to back. So I definitely would encourage you to go and check that out. They're all about the same length as this, about an hour, but really great content that you can use for yourself or share with your team or others. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions, not only on the content today, but maybe even just on coaching in general. If you're even unsure about whether coaching is right for you, I would definitely encourage you to just take advantage of one of those sessions, because Lori and Sherry will really help walk you through what it looks like, what that plan for you would look like, and what makes sense. And that'll really help give you the information that you need to make a decision for yourself. Okay. All right. I can't believe we're here, but I think we're at the end, Jill.
I'm muted. Yes, we surely are. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us this afternoon. As Jen said, we'll be sending a recording with some additional resources and a recap later on. So keep an eye out for that. And as we keep saying, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out.
Bye, everyone.
Awesome. Have a good one, everyone.